right, good to see everybody. Come on in. Hold on one second. I'm going to get it up and going on my phone so I can see your comments. Yeah, jump right in. And I know I've been teasing you all with an announcement, but this week there will be an announcement. I've mentioned that I've formed an exploratory committee, and that announcement's going to come this week in which direction we're going to go. So I'll let you know. While everybody's waiting to come in, let me give you... Actually, I've just been thinking about this story. So this is the 22nd year of dry Januaries for me, no drinking. And I don't know why I've thought of this story. I don't know why. I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to put this story out there, and then you make the connection to Washington or current events or whatever. But it's a story about trusting your judgment. So I was living in Europe and I was doing business, setting up business relationships with folks around Europe. I was on the road a lot and was doing a trade show. It's probably 1995 in Poland. And one of my rules was when we got in a new relationship in a country, that the first order had to be done with what's called a letter of credit. And I don't even know if letters of credit are even used anymore. But back then, it was kind of a pain in the ass to do if you were the buyer, because you had to take your money and you had to tie it up in a bank account. And then once the product arrived, then you could release it to the seller. And companies didn't like doing that because it tied up their cash, and they didn't know when the product was going to arrive, and they had to go through customs. And this was, Poland not being part of the European trade bloc at the time. It wasn't that long after the curtain fell, really. So in any event, so it was sort of a thing I insisted on, and it's done in every country, and it worked out well. And except I went to Poland, and I was talking to a couple of people and a couple of potential distributors, and one of them was fine with the letter of credit, didn't like it, but was like, okay, if this is what we need to do to get this going, then we understand it. But there was another guy who had a bigger operation who was really kind of a better fit, but he was really insistent he didn't want to do that letter of credit. So anyway, we go to dinner, and still negotiating, but as soon as we sit down, the bottles of vodka start coming out on the table. And I'm not a big drinker, and actually I didn't really drink for a long time before I moved to Europe, so I was really not, I didn't really have a threshold for this. And these guys start throwing it back. And then we're drinking. And then they take me to a club. And while we're drinking, he starts talking about this letter of credit again. And just wanted to do the first order. He said, it's just a pain in the neck. We can't do it. We're expanding. We'll pay you. We have good references. Da-da-da. And he's negotiating with me while I'm drunk. And I just kept changing the subject. I wasn't drunk. I had some drinks. So in any event, next morning shows up in my hotel just before I'm about to leave and starts hitting me again. We do it. And finally I said no. And passed on doing business with him, ended up doing business with the other distributor. And I found out the guy who was fighting me on the letter of credit went out of business 6 months later. Had this big operation, apparently was overextended and didn't have the cash, and that's the reason why he didn't want to do the letter of credit. I suppose the lesson here is that when people if there's a reason why you have a rule, then stick with the rule. And if people really want to fight that rule against your best interest, really be careful of those people. Now, I don't know how this ties into what I'm going to talk about today, but it definitely is just a little thing I wanted to put out there as sort of an introduction while I'm waiting for people to come in the room. Okay, there we go. So there's that. I'll come back to that story another time for those of you who stick with me, because I think there's even more to it, and there's more to take out of it. Okay. So what have we seen so far from Joe Biden? What have his early actions been? Keep in mind, when Donald Trump became president, what did he start working on straight away? He started working on keeping American companies in America. He started working with Carrier, if you remember, and kept those jobs in the United States. Started working with Ford about keeping jobs in the United States and not moving factories down to Mexico. Started going after and pushing forward the America First agenda. So what do we have from Joe Biden so far? We have Joe Biden killing the Keystone Pipeline, which I forget the number, but it's some not a huge number of jobs right now, but a lot of jobs. It was like tens of thousands, I think, of jobs in the United States. Not to mention the fact that he pissed off our partners up in Canada. So he's killed jobs where Trump was creating jobs, and he's ratcheting up immigration. Now, if you're one of those union people, those union leaders who decided to endorse Joe Biden, and if you're a union member who followed your union leadership and voted for Joe Biden, does that make you happy that he's bringing in, bringing in immigrants who drive down union wages? As people said, I pointed this out this weekend, and people said, "Oh, but he's guaranteeing the minimum wage." Let me come to that back in this. Okay, I'll bring it up right now. Does the minimum wage really? I mean, I suppose it helps union jobs, but if there are no jobs for unions to have, then does it really help them? And does it really help the entry-level worker who's trying to get a job, but whose employer in some small town in Mississippi, some small town in Nebraska, some small town in New Mexico, or northern Vermont up near the border, not even that close to the border. I mean, does that $15 an hour wage really help them? Because if it kills jobs, then what good is it to them? And it makes maybe the union leaders happy, but it's really anti-job and it's anti-working class. He has said that he's going to increase trade with China. Oh yeah, there's another bit of history there. So when I worked with Chinese distributors in some years ago, mid '90s, we had distributors in outside of in China or outside of China, depending on how you consider them at the time. I mean, Hong Kong was an English protectorate at the time, and Taiwan has this alienated relationship with the CCP. Those were where our distributors were, and they were selling into China. And they insisted, I've told the story before, they insisted that the product come not from our factory in Dublin, which I largely represented, but with our factory from New Jersey, because it said made in the USA. And there's an enormous appetite for products made in the USA. Suppose a product's made in China, because the Chinese don't trust their own products, at least they didn't back then. And it's not to say you can't get good quality products in China. I saw them in our space get involved in our business and produce really good quality products within a very short time, within about 3 or 4 year period. So they can, but they just would prefer products from the U.S. There's an enormous appetite. If China would open up those markets and allow us to sell our products in there, that would help our manufacturing base here. Would help them as well. But in its current form, the advantage goes all to China. Not good. Joe Biden is pushing for that. Paris Climate Agreement, is that good for American jobs or bad for American jobs? Who benefits from the Paris Climate Agreement? China is considered a developing country, even though its economy is about 3/4 of ours. And it will soon surpass it, but they're considered a developing country, but we're not. So we have these restrictions that they don't. Let's go back to that minimum wage. The minimum wage suppresses jobs in this country. All of these things are anti-working class person. I was saying on the local news here recently, and I've said it in my tweets, that the Republican Party is now the party of the working class. We better be, because the Democrats certainly aren't. The Democrats are for a different agenda, and that is what the title of this live stream is. They're for the Washington agenda. They're for the crony insider game agenda that helps their friends. Union leaders can go back and say, hey, we got an increase in the minimum wage upon which our wages are based. Okay, drive up your wages. what happens with your, how does that make you competitive in the world? Is that a good thing for the working class? I'm not so sure. In fact, I'm sure it isn't. Let's continue with the Washington agenda. Part of the Washington agenda is, to expand America's footprint, to grow the empire, to have more money running through defense contractors, and an expanded military presence, expanded military budget. So what does Joe Biden do? He increases the troops in Syria. Now, Donald Trump, I don't care if you hated him or not, but you have to say that what he did in the Middle East to calm down the Middle East, we don't even talk about terrorism from Islamic extremists anymore. It doesn't even come up because Trump handled the situation. Not only did he cut off their source of revenue and then go in and wipe them out, but he also increased the quality of the relationships that we have, with the exception of, say, Iran, in those areas to make it so that there was no animus directed at us. So what does Joe Biden do? He increases the troops in a really complicated place in Syria. Great. By the way, you never really hear him. I can't recall him really mentioning what he's going to do with Afghanistan, which Donald Trump would have liked to have left, and he's sent the message through that and he actually ordered the reduction that's going to leave just 2,500 troops there. 2,500 too many, mind you, but at least moving in the right direction, and doing that against massive resistance from the from the war party. Joe Biden never mentions that. He never mentions what he's going to do with it in Afghanistan. He never mentions what he's going to do in Iraq. He never mentions what's going to continue. Are we going to continue this covert war in Yemen? And will we go to war? Keep in mind that Joe Biden voted for the Iraq war. He voted for the Afghanistan authorization to use military force. A tragic mistake that has us in a war that's going on over 20 years now. No, not over 20 years, but just about 20 years. So, where are we going with this? By the way, who fights the wars? Is it the favorite sons, or again, is it the working class folks who go fight the wars? So Joe Biden's taking away their jobs. He's increasing their attacks, the prospects of them going to war and losing life or limb there, and all for pushing the Washington agenda. The Fed will keep rates low. Washington loves that because they get to keep running up deficits, and they don't have to increase their interest payments, so they love that. So spending, by the way, will continue to go up. By the way, what about civil liberties? Has Joe Biden ever defended them? Has he defended free speech? What's he going to do with social media? He hasn't said a word about the purging and the deplatforming on social media. Donald Trump didn't do much, but at least he recognized it as a problem. And this is where we're going. I'm writing a piece right now. I'll give you the headline. Pardon me. At every level of governance, Joe Biden is completely awful. But, because he's in cognitive decline, which is evident, he's calling lids regularly. Even now, he called a lid on Saturday. We didn't hear from him Saturday or Sunday. Did Donald Trump ever call a lid once? I mean, I know we went out and played golf and he wasn't around, but he was pretty much available almost every single day and probably spent way too much time in front of the cameras. Joe Biden's got to go take naps. He's got to get out there. And that's what makes him so unbelievably terrifying. Here's a guy, he's anti-jobs, he's pro-wars. His entire policy is against the American people. It's for, opening up borders that hurts American jobs. I mean, all of this has the Washington agenda, the standard, cut and dry Washington agenda, everything that Donald Trump fought against. Joe Biden is representing, and because he's in cognitive decline, you don't feel like you can reason with the guy. So here's the deal: I've liked Donald Trump for a long time. I liked him, back in the '80s when I read the book The Art of the Deal, and I used to see him on TV, and I thought he was an interesting character And his personality as a New Yorker, as a guy in real estate, didn't really bother me. I get how some beta people, people who don't connect with alpha people would find him, difficult. I get that, no big deal. But I also, he was a guy who trained lots of salespeople and always looked for performers. I didn't really care what your personality was. You could be an extreme introvert, but if you were capable of closing deals, if you understood the sales process, I'd support you. Donald Trump is the other end of the spectrum. If you were an alpha person with, with clear flaws in certain areas and unawareness in certain areas, I didn't really care as long as you performed. And that's what Donald Trump did. And Donald Trump was also someone you could reason with. So I felt like for somebody who was coming from from a libertarian point of view, that the best way to run a government and have a society is sort of structured around, libertarian principles. I always felt like I could reason with Donald Trump, that we could reason with him on issues like war, even spending, who's terrible on it. You could at least talk to him and he'd hear you out. I felt like I had those kinds of connections through the people who I know in Washington who know him and talk to him. And and Joe Biden is the exact opposite of that. For all of his aw shucks, I'm a good guy kind of thing, I feel your pain. I don't think he listens to a word that anybody says. I think that's all a front. I think it's all a fabrication. I think he is just telling you what you want to hear, making you feel what he wants you to feel, so that you'll leave him alone as he goes forward with an unbelievably anti-America, America last agenda, which is the Washington agenda. It seems like Washington, D.C. has been inverted, where it was supposed to work on behalf of the American public. It seems like all the interests around the world have leveraged Washington, D.C. and flipped it back as a weapon against the American people and the American Republic. That's kind of my big concern. So it's one of the things that drives me in politics. And Joe Biden is the kind of perfect monster. He's obtuse. He just doesn't listen. He moves forward with this agenda, as and the media supports him. They don't question him. He just goes on forward. So, in any event, that's sort of my thought today. I'm finishing up this piece. I'm going to hopefully get it published on a decent sized website about Joe Biden as the perfect monster. He's the monster of Washington, and all the people around him just sycophants supporting him, and driving America into the ground. We have huge problems. Going to keep fighting them. Going to keep talking about them. But that is kind of it for today. Just see a couple. Yeah, here we go. Here's Jim putting in loss of 51,000 jobs in oil industry. Yeah, all this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Antifa. Look at all these things. Yeah, you got it right here, Jim. Yep. Yeah, right, exactly. So at least Biden hasn't he hasn't tweeted. But what you've gotten is massive losses of jobs, 52,000 jobs. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Jim, because I was going to put 50,000 up, and I wasn't quite sure. I didn't have time to double check it before I came on, but I was pretty sure that was the number, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Troops sleeping in. This is all terrible stuff. I mean, those are just sort of the troops sleeping in the garage was an awful visual, and it's a terrible thing to treat those guys. And I hate to say that's I think going to be the least of our problems by the time we're finished with the Joe Biden administration. So, yeah. Yeah, look at it. It rescinds the Trump order banning Chinese communist involvement in the U.S. power grid. Okay. So, yeah, trade deficits matter. They have our money that they're using that we sent over there through trade. They build a huge, trade imbalance and a trade deficit, $600 million for 20 years. That money's got to get repatriated back to the United States in one way or another, directly or indirectly. And China, wants to get something for its American dollars, and we have a huge problem with China, really big problem. And for my libertarian friends who don't understand that, maybe we'll have a separate Zoom call about this. Because as a libertarian, I'm looking at the China situation, and this is precisely why in sort of libertarian language, why minarchy works right now, and why you got to recognize it as at this point in history, you have to have government. You have to, because China has a government, and if we didn't, the trouble would run deep. Anyway, let's leave it at that for today. Got a full day of stuff, and look for my announcement. Hopefully, maybe even as soon as tomorrow. I don't think it'll be tomorrow, probably Wednesday. And I look forward to chatting with you again. See you soon.